It's time now for a look at the day's business news with France 24's Cole Stangler. Cole, going to start with General Electric. It's nearing a deal to sell its aircraft leasing business, which is one of the biggest in the world.
Yeah, this agreement, first reported by the Wall Street Journal, GE reportedly planning to merge this part of its business with Ireland's AerCap Holdings. The deal could be worth more than $30 billion and could be announced as early as Monday. As it stands, the firms are two of the biggest jet leasing companies in the world, renting out everything from passenger jets to cargo planes, working with the world's top carriers. With airlines battered by the crisis and spending less, a merger could help the new company better manage the downturn.
Meanwhile, data released, Cole, over the weekend by the Chinese government showed a record spike in exports.
Yeah, exports rose nearly 61% over the first 2 months of the year, well above expectations and highlighting the strength of China's economic recovery. Electronics and textiles were at the top of the list as global demand remains strong for work-from-home devices and for masks. Either way, it's a stark contrast from the same period last year. Take a listen.
前2个月，我国对外贸易延续了去年下半年以来的持续向好态势，实现了开门红。这为全年开了一个好头，稳住了我国在全球供应链产业链中的中心地位，提升了我国在世界市场中的竞争力和占有率。
And not much reaction to that data by investors, with the major Asian indexes in negative territory to kick off the week. The approval of the U.S. stimulus plan in the Senate not doing much to lift shares either. So you can see here the Nikkei down around 0.4%, losses even steeper in Shanghai and across the board in Hong Kong and in Seoul. Oil prices, meanwhile, continuing to surge. Benchmark Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate now both over $70 a barrel. As you can see there, actually West Texas Intermediate just a little bit lower there. Brent crude over 70, its highest level in more than a year. It's after a drone attack on Sunday on Saudi oil facilities claimed by Houthi rebels. No impact on production, but clearly enough to unsettle markets. Oil prices already had been rising after OPEC and allies agreed to keep in place production cuts last week.
Well, changing gears now, Cole, and here in France, wine growers are breathing a sigh of relief.
It's because the U.S. and EU have agreed to suspend billions of dollars worth of tariffs on each other's goods. A 4-month truce in an ongoing trade battle, both sides calling, quote, a fresh start to trade relations. In late 2019, the U.S. imposed a 25% levy on a host of EU imports, including French wine. And the sector here paid an extra 500 million euros in tariffs alone last year. The lucrative Bordeaux region pointing to a loss of 100 million euros in turnover. The head of the Bordeaux wine trade group now says things, quote, are moving in the right direction.
Finally, Cole, from you, you're going to look at how the pandemic has disproportionately affected women in the workplace.
Female workers tend to be overrepresented in some of the low-wage service jobs that are hit by the crisis. And for those who lost their jobs, looking for new work can be especially difficult. James Vicina reports.
Finding a job in COVID times isn't an easy task. And finding a job as a woman during a pandemic is proving to be even more difficult. For some, it's about finding the time to actually go job hunting. Katie McAvoy was laid off in November, and the constant closing and reopening of schools because of COVID outbreaks means she's struggling to look for work.
We have school breaks and we have half days, and so to try to find a full-time job is very difficult because it feels like you can't possibly be the great candidate because you need all these exceptions for your child's schedule.
But that's far from the only hurdle. There's one topic that Alicia Zucker tries to avoid in interviews.
I tend to not bring up that I'm a parent because I'm worried that I will be judged for having to take care of my kids, or maybe they'll think that I'm unreliable. So I try not to mention it, even though I think it's a huge asset. Moms get stuff done.
Research shows that over 2.5 million women in the United States left the labour force last year, compared to 1.8 million men. Meanwhile, they accounted for over half of the 10 million jobs lost during the crisis, even though they make up less than half of the workforce. And it's a pattern that's been observed all over the world.
Women are disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Their overrepresentation in lower-paid sectors and occupations, such as, for instance, hospitality, retail or personal services, has made them particularly vulnerable in the labour markets struck by the COVID-19 crisis.
But even when they do get to keep their jobs, women are less likely to have a dedicated area to work from at home, meaning they're more likely than men to be disturbed whilst working away from the office.
That's all in business. At the moment, we're looking at that issue of inequality affecting women workers throughout the day.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot.